This is my son, Nate. When it was time for Nate to start kindergarten, I thought he would go to the school in our neighborhood. All that changed when we learned about a new school taking shape in our town. The Environmental School Project focused on place-based, imaginative, and ecological education. The concept was very different, and I struggled with the idea of the school. Initially, I was worried about how he could learn while being outside all day, and without textbooks or even grades. Despite my reservations, we enrolled him in 2011. And from the first day of this new school, I started documenting Nate's experiences to find answers for myself, and to see if this different way of teaching and learning could work for him and for us.
I think we need to start right from the beginning. Why do something like this, right? Why create a schooling situation that's totally different? And part of the reason is when you look at the different settings in a school, when you look at the environment created by the school, a lot of experiences are missing, hands-on, in-context settings. So if that's the case, then you need to do something about it. So Jody McQuarrie and I got together to discuss issues about education and learning, specifically about how kids can learn differently.
There are outdoor programs. There are experience-based models. There are place-based or community-based programs that run in different places around the world. So there are little pockets of these, right, that do parts of this. There is nothing in the world that has attempted to merge the place and community-based ed, the experiential ed, the environmental sort of sustainability ed, ecological ed, at the same time that it is also a research project between a community, a school district, and a university. So in that respect, it's on the leading edge and the cutting edge of, something that's quite different. It's also what makes the project and the school so incredibly complex.
This is outside the box, so far outside the box that, there was a bit of trepidation. But Clayton and his team, the people who brought forward the concept, plus the fact that I was supportive of it, they got in behind it. And I did say I lost some sleep in the beginning, there's no doubt about that. But I think in order to really get some good things happening, you have to take some risks.
It's about opportunity. I thought it was a brilliant plan. And I had the opportunity to do it, and not very many people get that opportunity. So I think when things come along in life, you just have to say, I'm gonna give it a try. I had a wonderful school, great staff, things were smooth, everything. And I had a good friend of mine, a teacher in the school, said, "Are you sure? It's one of the best schools in the district. Things are going well. Are you sure you want to do this?" And I didn't hesitate really at all. I said, yeah, that's what I want to do. Here is one part of the stomach. This is also part of it. So yeah, so I think this is the stomach. I think this would be the intestine.
I think learning's a lot more complex than we ever thought it was going to be. The whole system, a Eurocentric or American way at looking at teaching and learning, became so standardized and so narrow that it didn't allow students or learners to expand to where they possibly could be, right? And so if it's complex, then we have to deal with all the complexities of learning and give kids not just the written component or the reading component of learning, but the actual experience to learning. For a while they thought that schooling was broken. It's not really broken, it just needs to look differently.
Let's check to see if this is a, no, come on, turn yourself around. If he's got a cutthroat, does he have the slice on his throat that's like red or yellow under his chin?
No.
No, so we're definitely not looking at a cutthroat.
The Western world has developed a particular form of education that we have all come to, or most of us have come to associate with what learning is, right? And it's this kind of condensed experience, and the idea is it's very efficient, so all the information is mostly there in books or in a wiser, older person, and it's presented and, it's explored as well, and I think it's too easy to criticize mainstream education. There's a lot of excellent mainstream education, but it does still fall in with this paradigm of a kind of concentrated, efficient experience.
We know a lot about learning, and one of my pet peeves is that we know what we know and yet we keep doing what we're doing. And there's disconnect from what we know and then what schools are set up like.
We've been doing the same thing for a lot of years, and it's great for the select few, and teachers seem to evolve from the ranks of the kids who did well in school and liked school and were able to sit in a row. But there are lots of kids who can't do that. And I don't think that our traditional school system serves them very well.
The challenge, how can we incorporate all the needs of a school act and the needs of this whole way of looking at learning that's been evolving for all that time, and say if we broke all the rules and said, well, what could it look like if it was just learning? Then we'd have to take away the school, we'd have to take away the walls, we'd have to change everything and change the metaphors in which these people have expected for so long. Because when you sit in a math class for 45 minutes with a textbook open, that's not learning math, right? That's plugging in operations that nobody goes to. And if teachers have one of the highest anxieties over math, then why are we doing it the way we're doing it? But every system in the schooling systems that we have in the world are so structured and so linear and so bureaucratic that every time we turn a corner to try to make a change to look at learning and not work, we confront another wall or another brick. It all seems to come back to, it should look like this. They should be sitting in desks, in rows, in a classroom, in a school building. It should all look the same as what I had when I was a child.
For me, I always really struggled as a parent, but also as an educator, like how it was that we spend the first, 4 years of our kids' lives making sure that they're like optimally set up, like the best food and, best toys and perfect schedule and great clothes and mom and dad being around and all that kind of stuff. And then we're happy to just have them like struggle through school for the next 13 years. That never really made any sense to me. And so I wanted to make sure that we were putting my son in an environment in which he could thrive.
I think I was looking for an alternative. After 6 years in a regular school, I could tell that for May that wasn't working for her. When you're not at the top of the class and you're not at the bottom of the class and you're just a mild-mannered kid in the middle, you're looked over, you're passed over. And she used the word invisible when I talked to her about it. And so she knew that she was invisible. And I didn't want that for her because I knew that she deserved more than that.
In my school years, I would escape to nature. We lived very close to the Malcolm Knapp Research Forest, and so anytime I was stressed in high school, I would go up there, I would sit in the forest. I'd even take my homework up there and sit in the forest and do it. It was always my dream. Why can't this be school? Why can't we just be here doing what we should be doing? Just living and learning from life rather than learning irrelevant subjects out of books and so on. So I definitely really dreamed that this is what school could be, and it was very exciting to hear that, that was thoughts that other people had obviously had.
The challenge is that when we're looking at learning, we're not looking at work. We're not looking at school work. We're not looking at homework. We're looking at learning, and learning happens all the time. So how do we involve the community? How do we involve the parents, the kids, in looking at learning? Right, the teachers to look at learning from where we are right now to where we can be, not with just the group or with a whole classroom. How can we look at it for learning that child's next step or that group's next step? What does it look like when everyone learns differently?
7, 8.
It's an emergent curriculum school, so the kids really have a say in their own learning and in where their interests are going to go as far as their learning, and that was huge for us. The other thing that was huge for us was how there was a real focus on celebrating each kid's successes and each kid's strengths, as opposed to comparing them against a checklist of things that they're deficient in, and saying, well, he's not up to this, he's not up to this. You know, we know that kids develop at different times and stages, and again, it just never really seemed to sit well with me to know that, you know, at this age they're supposed to do this, and at this age they're supposed to do this, and if they're not, then they're not measuring up and there's something wrong with them. That didn't sit well with me, and the fact that this school provides that sort of breathing space for kids to be themselves and to grow and learn in their own time is like just huge for us.
What I try to write in the report card is what they're capable of. And so I will write that this child can read and write in these ways, and then I'll put a little evaluative statement behind that that goes, this is exceeding their grade level, or is fully meeting at this level, or they're not quite up to what's expected for their age. And so that's the kind of language that goes in there, but I try to describe what they're capable of or where they're at, and then let the parent know that how it relates to what's expected for their age.
In the normal school, they're teaching you, but you have to learn the rest. And if you don't learn it in this amount of time, then you fail. It was stressful because I felt like I was gonna fail or like do really bad, but also because I didn't want to be disappointed or make anybody like think like, oh, Faith's so dumb, she can't even get an A or a B or whatever, because I didn't understand or I needed more time. You come here and it's like you're learning the same thing but in a totally different way, and for me it makes way more sense just to do this instead of sitting down and doing the test.
The competitive nature of marking is horrible, and I think it should go away. And I'm so thankful that this school doesn't have traditional marks. I think it only serves to create competition between individuals. I think we should be focusing more on collaborative projects. I think that's the best way to do it.
The thing that a B doesn't describe is what you know. It's a letter, and it still winds up being subjective. And the other aspect of that is that with a letter grade, you might get that B because you just understand math really well, and with paying little attention, you do fine. Another kid may have been working extremely hard to get to the same point, and so but that's not described in a grade like that. Whereas when I write it in a report and I say that you're doing a very good job of demonstrating this concept, and you've worked really hard to get there, it's more descriptive than just the letter. And so I think that you do have to share with and talk to the parents about how this language that I'm using in this report card pertains to where your child's at. But I think that it actually describes better where they're at than the letter grade does.
It's important that if you want to bring water along, that you got that along with you. If you have a bathroom break that you need to take in a minute, get that done. And we'll frogs and ravens will rally right back here.
It's a multi-grade classroom environment. So we have K through 8 in family groupings. We call them clans. And so those family groupings are split into different groups for different needs at different times.
In any regular classroom that I've ever had, sometimes I taught grades 6 and 7, but there's also just that range of ability that ranges from kids that sometimes are maybe have grade 2 ability in reading or writing or in certain areas, up to ones that are way beyond their grade level. And so you're already working with a wide range of kids. Here, it gives us the ability to go, I'm going to take this older group of kids plus these 4 others that are able to work at this ability range, and sometimes there'll be a couple kids that are at this age group, but they need some other piece of their learning to happen with the younger kids. And so it's a lot more flexible, and you actually wind up with a more homogeneous group than you do in your normal classroom, where you just have a grade 7 classroom.
And when we have K to 7s, there's a certain expectation that the older kids are going to help the younger students. And that is a great learning experience in itself. But we would be off with a large group, and kindergarten kids, all of a sudden somebody has to pee. Or we're ready to go and 4 kids have to pee. And they all need some sort of, especially earlier, they need some sort of assistance. And we found really with the younger kids, it was really slowing down some of the stuff we could do. So now we try to do some activities every day that include whole family groupings. But we found that we really do need to break them into groups of sort of age, skill appropriate levels. And we just had to learn that.
It makes you like talk to people and like know more people than just like your friends. Like you talk to everyone in the school and you all know each other, and then you're like learning at different levels, but you're helping each other out as you go.
Yeah. Okay, now put it right onto here.
Put the flat side in like that.
Push?
Yeah, push it, push down. Good. Put your batteries.
It gives me opportunities to teach others. That's a large plus side. It's probably one of my favorites too.
The K makes a K sound, so it's gonna go L.
Okay.
It's really awesome how I can have a 5-year-old just hang off a 6'3" grade 7 boy and him not even care, or really, it's no big deal. It's really cool to see them interact and just take care of each other and learn from each other. And I find that our Munchkins can speak so well since they listen to 13-year-old kids talk all day long.
I like it kind of, actually.
Why?
Well, because they're really nice.
Do they help you a lot?
Yeah.
Yeah, how do they help you?
Well, they do help me learn words and stuff. Like awesome.
And even those middle kids that don't have the strong reading skills yet, we go over with them how to be a good buddy reader. So things like looking at the pictures, segmenting words, that kind of stuff that they may not also be strong with. It gives them a chance to practice those skills as well in a safe environment where they make a difference with the little kid, but it also makes a difference for themselves, which is really cool.
Well, I do help a lot of little kids.
How do you help them?
Well, sometimes I help them spell words.
I think it also gives the Munchkins a safe person to go to if they need something, or if something's worried them, or they just have questions about stuff. They have that big kid that they know knows them, knows what they're all about, that they can feel comfortable with to go to if they need something.
Just last week, I watched as one of our kindergarten boys, we'd come back from a hike and he was really struggling. And I got him all organized and got his lunch, and the next thing I looked over and he was surrounded by boys, grade 4 and up, grade 4 to 8. And he was totally engaged. He had a big smile on his face eating his lunch. At the beginning of the year, he would often eat alone. And so not only was he socially engaged with, all these other boys, there were all these other boys inviting him into and including him in their space and their conversation. You don't see things like that. I've never seen things like that. So that kind of an experience for the kids, I think, has become, for so many of them, it's all they've ever known. And for others, it's become so normal for them. I'm not sure they realize just how impressive that is, just how lucky they are to actually be in the middle of that.
Well, it's funny how fast the idea of grades sort of slips away. Socially, it's been a huge success, I think. You get the sense at a conventional school that the grade 3s, for example, would never hang out with grade 5s, and that the groups are sort of more divided, whereas here, grade mixing is fairly seamless. So I think socially it instills a different type of community and a different type of caring for each other.
I have noticed that the relationship between the kids is based more on interest versus age and grade. So it's okay that a grade 4 boy and a grade 7 boy both like to play guitar and they're just gonna jam at lunchtime. That's okay. Nobody's gonna judge it, nobody's gonna make fun of it, nobody's gonna mock the grade 7 for hanging out with the grade 4 at lunchtime.
It's nice to have friends that are out of your grade and different grades. I guess it would give younger kids to have more opportunities for role models, I guess.
I notice tremendous changes in terms of the way the children interact with each other. especially the multi-age groupings, so across ages. I taught for many years in the regular school system. I also taught in private school, and I've also taught in a couple of different places around the world. And never have I seen students interact across ages like this, where it's not at all uncommon to see, a grade 8 boy assisting a kindergarten child.
I think it's cool mixing in the little kids because as a younger kid at my old school, I thought that I was kind of not quite inferior, but I wasn't as good as the other kids because they were older and I was kind of smaller, so I wasn't as important in their eyes. But now everybody's on the same level.
It's been one of the most surprising aspects for me to watch. I remember the first day they got into the mixed grades and the teachers asked the older students to pair up with a K or a grade 1 to do some reading. It was super awkward at first, and I remember thinking, oh, this is going to be interesting. But then that dissipated really fast, like even within the first week. And it became apparent really fast that there's a different caring that exists between the students here.
In this school, we know everybody. Everybody is like our friend, and we know them, and we know their name, we know their family. And I think it's really cool because we get to interact with one another, and it doesn't matter what your age is or like what grade you're in, you're friends with that person.
And then for some particular kids and families, I've noticed kids actually blossom, and I think that's a really good metaphor. The head's up, the shoulders are back. They're wide open in ways they never were before. I think some kids feel loved and recognized in ways they perhaps never did before in school.
It's really good because they're not scared to come up and talk to us. So, they'll come and play with us and stuff, and we just go and hang out with them too.
Yeah, you like that though?
Yeah, sometimes you want to play with the older kids and stuff, but other times it's good.
I've heard a couple comments from the older kids, they would appreciate, I think as you get older, sometimes you start to have that need for your own peer group becomes a little stronger. So I have heard some feedback about, but I think they've tried to provide for that more this year with the sort of older kid camping trips and stuff like that, and providing for the older kids to have group experiences of leadership.
From one end, the older end, to when they're all mixed like that, the kids become leaders and teachers and coaches, facilitators for the younger ones. The younger ones learn a lot stronger oral language. They pick up on a lot more skills. They have greater one-to-one attention. So that sharing and building of relationships is very important for student learning. Beyond that, we can move them into different age groupings according to needs. So if a grade 3 is having difficulty with their language skills, they can work with the kindergartners and they won't feel the difference or the stress. If some of the grade 1s are talented and are working on mathematics with the grade 7s, then they can at times work with the grade 7s and there's no real stress. So the strength of it is that we can move the kids over and back and forth so that conventional or Eurocentric or American way of looking at the grades is gone. So it's about development, it's about learning, and it's about different ways of combining the kids to have them learn within their strengths and talents. The 5 pedagogical practices are teaching and learning environments. We'd have place-based education, imaginative education, we'd have inquiry methodology, inclusion, and then the environmental ed. So if we start with the first, place-based education, and that's learning the histories and knowledge from the place itself. And we can extend that to become the place as being the educator. Those stories that arise from being in one given place becomes the first educator in any experience that we go into.
In a traditional classroom, it could be anywhere. It's a lack of context, and the natural world, the more than human world is backgrounded. And so by having a school that's based outdoors, that's based outside of a building, first of all, allows us to have direct experience with things that we can learn about, whether that's science around learning about trees and salamanders or the immediate environment, but also beyond that too, learning of, with, through the natural world. It's huge. It's not just exciting and emotive and enjoyable, but it's also, I think, more rich and nuanced and subtle. So I think it provides a lot more capacity to learn all different kinds of things.
Yeah, so they're kind of dark on the back. If you look at them from above, they're dark, but then their bellies are white. So if you're a predator and you're looking up at a salmon above you, it's going to blend in with the light color of the sky. So they're going to have a light belly and dark back.
Because we're learning in place, right? The best place to learn is in the natural environment. We miss a lot of that, and so the best teacher is in the natural environment. So we spend as much time as we possibly can there. We have a lot of parks, a lot of wooded space in Maple Ridge and Pitt Meadows, along the dikes and on the trails of Blue Mountain or in different places. And we can open and embrace those trails and those spaces, and we can learn there really quite easily.
Something in the store window caught Arthur's eye. It was the most amazing bionic bunny action figure he had ever seen.
I think kids want to be outside. It's hard for a lot of kids to be cooped up inside of four walls. And it says something that this is the space that learning happens in this box. And so when you can get outside that box, not only is that physical, getting outside of a box, but it's also metaphorical or cognitive or emotional. You're getting outside of the regular confines of what human beings tend to think of as learning, or at least the way it's come to be thought of now. And so you're escaping potentially some of the trappings of mainstream education.
What's more relevant, measuring the perimeter of your garden to build a fence, or what's 12 plus 12 plus 12 plus 12? The perimeter of the square that's drawn in the textbook. What's going to be making a more emotional connection to them, and things that make an emotional connection is what you remember. You don't remember what's in the textbook because you don't care about it. You don't have that emotional connection to it. When you're out building your fort and have to learn how to use tape measure, learn how to build the structures, you have that connection because you have your hands on it, because it's around you and you're experiencing it. You have that emotional connection, and that helps you remember it and make it meaningful.
See inside me. You can come inside here. Like, you want me to look inside too? See? Look at this.
We have a piece of the forest where the kids are building forts. And it has had a lot of dead trees, a lot of blowdown. So we went in there with hand saws and cut up trees, and the kids industriously fell to making forts. And for the longest time, they would just go into the forest, build their forts, play around a bit. But as the forts started to become completed, we really looked and said, okay, well, this is all fun, but is there really learning going on here? Or are they just playing in the forest?
Boys and girls, it's time to start heading back for snack time. Oh, no. That's a great fort you guys came out of.
We built a village, and last year we made like families, like, oh, you can be the mom and we can be all your children, and like this can be your house, and this could be our neighbor, and this can be like the store. Once you're done your fort, you can build your little like shop. You can sell twine for amount of sticks, like you can trade sticks.
We didn't dictate what groups, how they're going to do it. That just naturally evolved. And then as we watched them play, then we realized there's a whole different social dynamic going on. We really looked at this as this evolving culture, this whole society. So then we had our transportation corridors sort of evolving, and then the need for conservation. And that opened up a whole bunch of conversation about what we do to the planet, like our land use. That's sort of how things can evolve and have evolved in our school.
There's a lot of research about building forts, not just because they're a fun thing for kids to do. And so when we look at it first as a fun thing to do, that's a very social activity where kids can can work together, work out problems, build together. I mean, if we were to create a social story and talk about it, why not actually do it rather than separate it into some picture book or something like that? And they can actually build it, make it, and solve their problems within there. If we take it to the deeper and broader sense of what goes on in fort building, they're learning a ton of skills on how to use tools, saws and hammers, or they're using different types of saws, they're using lashing and the skills of tying knots and pulling it together to understand friction and what that looks like, to understand the construction of a building and what their building looks like compared to others. So as just that one little activity of fort building expanded to this really huge, broad, different activities that went along with it. And that doesn't include the possibility of building the slope and design or the angles and for mathematics and making sure that the rain sloughs off of it and that if there's drips, how to solve that problem. Like within that, there's all the other activities that go along with it, which is quite incredible.
Okay, good job. Where you are. So are we ready for our adventure? Yeah. All right.
Well, lessons, topics, and big ideas and curriculum kind of like emerge from the place, and you can't really force it, or else it's just not going to be relevant to where you are, right?
Do you think you guys can count how many banana slugs we see on the way?
We saw.
How many so far? One.
It's better now that we've been places for 2 years, and it's going to keep getting better once we get to know the places even better, I think.
So you kind of look at what does this place offer for us, and what can we set them up to learn from in this place. And we spend almost 2.5 months down at Elko Park and spend a lot of time on the salmon and the watershed and all that there. It offers a lot, but it's also a place that the kids that don't want to go and cut open a salmon and look at the innards of that can go and explore about the aquatic insects instead. So there's lots of possibilities too, I guess.
Let me know when you think it's a work of art.
Good. Do it, Minnie.
Here's the reveal. Ready?
Okay. Let's reveal.
Look at the size of it. It's huge.
Our kindergarten kids have dissected fish on 2 different occasions this year. We've looked at scales. We've watched them on their redds, on their spawning beds. And so it's about opportunity. They're right there in front of us. And I think by being immersed in it, they just pick up little bits and they all sort of form a bigger picture. So I would like to see our grade 1s now who've already been here, this is their 2nd year. What are they gonna be like when they're 10 or 12 or grade 7 or 8? They're gonna really have a different understanding of a river than most people would ever have.
I think for us, the greatest advantage to the school being held outside is the realness of it. We've done a really good job of trying to disconnect ourselves from anything that might be a little bit uncomfortable or might be wet or icky. And again, it's just this further disconnect from the realness that is life. And so I think for us, the fact that my son comes home and he's had a really real wet, sloshy day outside is really great. He's learning about real, how to really care for yourself outside in those conditions. He's understanding what happens to the ground when it pours rain. He understands what happens to the trees when it pours rain. And at what point, standing in a field in a rainstorm, you're wet, and standing under a tree under a rainstorm and you're dry, like how long does that last? I think the advantage is that it's gonna really prepare him because he is getting a real experience. It's not a removed experience. It's not a simulated experience. It's a real experience.
You guys might need to go over there so you can see that one a little closer.
I think it's healthy. They're breathing fresh air and they have space to move and they have a better understanding of nature and their place in it and the ecosystem and they have an amazing understanding and respect of wildlife, right from bugs all the way up to the bears and cougars that they're supposed to fear and everything in between.
I think just the freedom of space and allowing the beauty that happens in nature every day to influence their thoughts and their choices has been a huge positive influence on them.
Zippy wanted to do all the work when we were doing the stuff.
So he was working hard?
Yeah, he wanted to do all the work.
Nice job. Kept involved and didn't play around too much, huh? Nice job. What did you appreciate?
Even though his nickname continues to be Zippy, he's less zippy. And I think a big part of that is because he has the opportunity to and room to move, that has allowed him to be Nate, but allowed him still to be in circumstances and to have opportunities sort of repeatedly to still learn things.
The berry bush looks like this. I want to write down these spots, and they're for birds to eat.
Whereas if he were in a setting where he were confined with walls and where the message would consistently be, sit down, be quiet, those sorts of things, that would be really difficult for him. And sometimes that movement and that apparent disinterest is actually not listening. He's actually listening. Like I find often with him, he can be moving on the periphery of something. We can be talking about something. We can be looking at something. And then 10 minutes later, just when you think, did any of that sink in? Boom, he comes up with a question that connects directly to what we were just talking about. Or he makes a statement or some kind of connection that indicates, 100%. Okay, he got that. He just needs to be up on his feet. He just needs to move around more. He needs that space to sort of breathe. And I think it's really important for his body before he can kind of regulate his body and before he can engage in that cognitive kind of work, he needs to do that. It actually sort of satisfies a physiological need for him.
That looks like some kind of, no, it's some kind of blackberry. Salmonberry. Is it salmonberry?
Yeah. It's very small.
Maybe a small salmonberry? They're both in the same family.
I guess for some people, I think that if you're inside it seems more controlled. You have the people in one area. It's in some ways easier to control, but sometimes people like to fidget and stuff. But sometimes that's not acceptable. So when you're out here, it's open to doing different stuff. So I can take a piece of grass or a stick or something and fiddle with it in my fingers. We're not in rows all the time. We can kind of sit where we want. We can kind of sit how we want.
And do you find that allows you to concentrate more?
For me, it helps me concentrate, just kind of being able to do stuff. At my old school, if I did that, I would kind of start zoning out, just sitting there, not doing anything. But here, when I have something in my fingers, it keeps me kind of into what we're doing, so I'm paying attention.
Ow! What are you, Destiny? Whoa. I wish I could play. But I'm not in your fort.
There's definitely an increased awareness that getting kids out during their school hours is really important, because generally, left to their own devices, right now they're not getting outside very much. So I think there's a will, but it's becoming increasingly tricky to get kids outside in your average school system. There's a lot of red tape, there's a lot of permission that needs to be granted before teachers can get their kids out there, so there's a lot of hurdles to go through. Studies have shown that within minutes of being in and seeing green space, kids' stress levels drop immediately.
I do agree that there's a multitude of capacities that are facilitated by being outside, for a school to be outside. But part of me really thinks that there's some things that really are learned best inside. Potentially. I think there's a lot to be said for emergent place-based mathematics. It's awesome. But I think having access to a lab, having access to indoor spaces where the books can stay dry, having access to indoor spaces for all different kinds of reasons. I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I really think that having access to outdoors and having really wild spaces, this is an awesome place to learn, and I don't want to downplay that. And also talking to the teachers and talking to parents and kids too, I think indoor spaces really do have their place in education, and we shouldn't just assume that just because you're outdoors, it's going to be the end-all be-all. Outdoors is fantastic. We should be out in the more than human world because it really facilitates learning really, really well, I think. But indoor spaces provide other kinds of capacities. We don't need to be sterile. They can be incredibly innovative, exciting, creative spaces. They just have to be designed that way. and the cost-effective way that the province of British Columbia runs their schools, and most of mainstream North America, is these sterile boxes. And it's sad. It's sad. So it'd be nice to see both more mainstream schools going outside more and also having more exciting indoor spaces where the design is around learning.
I'd say there hasn't been any disadvantage that the kids have coped with the weather, and I think we've had really tough winter and spring as far as weather. It's been a good test to see how the school would cope. I think that paper takes a little bit of abuse. I think for actually keeping work and preserving it, I think that's been a bit of a challenge. I think some parents who haven't been able to see the work taken home because it's turned into pulp, it's a little bit tougher for them, but I think they're starting to accept that the learning's happened. They're starting to hear the dialogue of their children, or I think there's been more effort to take photographs of the work, take recordings of the work, so that can then be applied to social media so parents can hear what's been going on.
What do you think about being outside all the time?
Well, I kind of like it because then you can see, you can see nature and stuff, like plants.
And why do you like that?
Because when you do, you can even look for berries.
There's researchers here studying, how the learning is affecting the kids and things. I really think they should be doing physical studies on these kids too, seeing what their bone density is going to be, their growth, compared to other kids. Corinne is so strong and so fit and so balanced and great and healthy, right? It's really interesting. So I think that's one advantage to the outdoors.
Their resiliency just blows my mind every day, and how tough they are. They can maneuver through things. They can run through a trail that's barely a trail. They can go on long hikes. It's just like amazing what they can do now, for sure.
Come on, Lily.
In terms of the physical education capacities of our school, it's huge. It's fantastic. I mean, there's no question that this is a great place for that because they're constantly moving. My anecdotal observation would be that these kids are way more physically able, way more agile, way more flexible, way more strength and agility than a kid who's sitting at a desk 6 hours a day with, half an hour of PE. If they're lucky, once a day, more likely 2 or 3 times a week. They're always playing games, they're always running around. It's fantastic from a physical education perspective.
Raina, why are you sitting in it?
The connection to the river. When we're here, it's always in our ear. We can always hear it. So it's kind of part of us now, I guess. And the connection to the salmon is a big deal for the kids too. The fishing, the learning about the salmon, getting to experience all the stuff that the river can bring you. It's just really great.
The salmon themselves have that whole cycle that are not just connected to the salmon story and the life cycle of a salmon. It's connected to everything that's engaged with it on the sides, the riparian zones and beyond, right? So it's a huge learning possibilities, whether it's a river like the Alouette or a creek like Kanaka Creek or a small stream that's just coming off of Blue Mountain. You can always find that broad, deep sense of learning.
I know people are worried about safety at the beginning, but I feel they're safer here than they would be in your average schoolyard in a city environment.
We should probably review what we are going to do if there's a bear sighting. Ooh, what do we do first? Number one thing. Gabe, you got this one?
Not very many people.
Group up together. Can you group up with the people around you to demonstrate this?
The kids have been taught what the risks and the dangers are. And instead of being told, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that, be afraid of this, be afraid of this, be afraid of this, they've been taught what there is to fear and how to handle it.
Yeah, they're educating the kids, making them aware that they're there, making them aware that everybody and every animal's got a right to the forest.
The kids make too much noise. I'm not really concerned about them getting eaten by a bear at all. Actually, I'm pretty sure most of the bears around here are like, ooh, there's 80 kids over there. I'm out of here, let's go.
It's not always outside. That's what people refer to it as the outdoor school. And it is predominantly outdoor and in nature, but there are also indoor settings like swimming and the library and structured indoor situations where they learn that environment as well, right? The environment's just where they are.
Environmental education used to be just about the the woods or tree hugging or just by having it being involved with the natural world or more than human world, but environment to us is a lot different. We call it an environmental school project because environmental ed means the environment in which we're learning. It's a broader, bigger sense. It could be in a council chambers, or it could be in a longhouse, or it could be in the forest, or it could be in another setting within whatever the activity or project that we're working on.
Hey guys, I see people without rain gear on. If you do not have your raincoat on, go get it right now. Gavin?
Hurry up. And come back quickly, so.
Get your raincoat on. There's a big storm coming. This is nothing compared to what we're going to get in about 2 minutes.
Hey girls and boys, let's start this over, but let's move over into under the shelter there. Sorry. Hey, while we wait, why am I telling some kids that have umbrellas, get rid of the umbrella, get a rain jacket? Why is that, to Bokhurst? Okay, they kind of poke each other, but there's a bigger reason than that. Faith? No? Justin? Hand isn't free, right? I'm kind of only half as useful as regular, and sometimes I'm not very useful with two hands, am I? So, let's go back to the topic.
I'm not sure if it's a challenge. I think it's a learning experience. See, if we were to experience weather and get to know weather, then we would be different in weather settings. So like the kids would say, and I've quoted this often, the kids say, why aren't they outside? And the people inside will say, why are the kids outside in this weather? Right? So the kids get to know weather, they get to dress appropriately, they get to stay warm and dry, they get to learn out there and do all their activities out there.
I really worried about it the first few months of being here because I thought it rained all the time. And I spent a lot of time in the woods too, and I still thought it rained all the time. And I also thought that it would be a problem. If you'd asked me in September a year and a half ago, I would have told you for sure it's going to be a problem. But very quickly, I'd say to the kids, I'm sorry it rained so hard today, and they'll all go, it didn't rain hard at all. And they were way less bothered by it than I was. And I kind of went from holding my breath and being worried about it to kind of running with what's happening. And the kids do too, and they've become wiser over the last 2 years also. A year ago, they all took their rain jackets off when they got too hot. They get wet and then they couldn't get warm. Now they take those bottom layers off and keep the rain jacket on. And they just keep going. You kind of adapt and keep going, you know? And it's not an issue. We must be playing like rain beats on the drum, because every time we start playing the drums, the skies open up on us, don't they?
In the forest, it's easier to deal with the rain because the trees kind of block a lot. So it's no big deal when you're in the forest, but when you're in an open field, dikes, at the lake, you cannot hide. But the kids don't care. They really don't. You'll ask any kid that goes here, what do you do when it rains? They'll say, you wear rain gear. And the kids are stoked that they can jump in puddles all day long.
So very often when it's just a bit of rain, it doesn't really seem to affect their mood very much at all. Obviously there are times when it's cold and wet and it's been raining for a long time and everything's damp and wet, and that impacts it, right? So then it's just a case of trying to find different ways of doing the learning in those situations.
I want to do two things with you today. I want to give you some more time to work on your projects that you've been working on. I also want to get down and I want to take a look at the aquatic insects in the water right now. Now, going down to do the aquatic insects, you're exposed to the weather, you're exposed to the water a little bit, and it's supposed to rain less as the day goes on. So I don't know if you want to save the aquatic insects till after recess or till after lunch. But that would mean this time right now that in here would be some real focused work time.
Some days when it's really pounding, you think, oh, well, it's going to be a challenge. And Monday we totally changed our plan. It was pouring rain and we did a great hike. And we hadn't done a big hike here for quite a while, so we looked at signs of fall and changes since the last time we'd been on the hike. And we had a great time, and it rained all day, but bundled up and, you know, put our rain hats on, and other than the odd blister from their kids are wearing waders now. You know it's raining when they wear their waders to school. Anyway, that's the kind of thing that we do.
I think it's just another part of what we can learn from out here. You know, like there's so much to learn about the watershed and the rain, or the, you know, what cold is like.
Weather is a part of real life, and it rains, it snows, it sleets, it's sunshine, it's foggy, it's whatever. It's real life, especially on the West Coast. And it's another layer of knowing the place, knowing that this is the West Coast and we live in a rainforest, knowing that the weather and the systems and everything impact everything else. And I think it sort of is a piece of understanding of place. So if we're gonna look at place, you can't just take a part out because it's awkward or a little bit icky, or sometimes you're cold or sometimes you're wet. So you just dress for it and work it out and understand that that's just a piece of the whole. And so again, if we're after holistic education, if we're looking to educate the whole child within a whole experience, weather is a huge part of that.
Yesterday was like pouring rain. There's like a lake by the shelter, and like people play in it. Like they go, oh, look, a puddle, let's go in it. And we had to make a rule not going into puddles until after lunch, so you don't get soaking wet.
In a way, I'm kind of excited when it's raining because it's really fun. Like once you're soaked, then you can't get any more wet than that, so it's good. But I usually tend to stay warm now.
I wear a lot less fashionable clothes now. It's nice not to worry about what you're wearing. Just worry about how it's going to protect you from the elements.
I think that in the same way as the students have developed a resilience towards it, right? So I think the parents have as well, and the acceptance of what state a kid should be in when they come home from school has changed, right? And developed systems for drying things and cleaning things. And yeah, I don't think I feel like I hear so many stories about it now. It's just kind of, well, that's how they come home, and that's just the way it is.
Surprisingly, there have been no issues like weather, regarding weather. Everyone says, don't they get wet? Well, yes, they do. And it doesn't matter. What other people would think would be an obstacle or a deterrent or a detriment, it's not an issue. They've embraced the weather, and they've embraced the surroundings, the dirt, everything that anyone else would think is negative. To them, it's just is. And it's great. They like getting dirty. They're not afraid to get wet. It's awesome.
Our biggest expense for the school has been clothing, for sure. Merino long underwear and microfleece long underwear, and kid-sized hip waders, and Gore-Tex kids jackets, and wool, really good thick wool socks, and really good warm boots, and one-piece snowsuits, and all that kind of stuff. Like we went for it because at the end of the day, him being able to be warm and comfortable and dry all day allows him to be here and allows him to learn in this environment. And we decide as extension of, it was his version of school supplies.
Mud is so awesome. The kids never get tired of mud. So we do have a bit of a rule that you can't play in the mud till right at the very end of the day. Huge challenge, I think, for parents because they have to transport them home. And then I'm sure all these clothes must go straight in the wash.
I can't.
I do a lot of laundry. Yeah. And I mean, I think that, quite honestly, I have two of the dirtiest kids here. I also don't worry about the fact that, if my kids really want to roll in the mud for that day, then that's great. Enjoy it.
When I'm gonna still be in here, just God this whole, okay? Okay.
They love mud. And I realize how much I do too. Like, I'll stand in it and I'm just sitting there making little things with my feet, but there's, in the classroom, they're bringing in Play-Doh, and they got this little sandbox there for the kids to play with because there's this ability to manipulate, and it's tactile and it feels neat. Well, we don't have to bring it in, it's just built in right here, and it draws everybody from grade 8 down to kindergarten. My son yesterday, I had to get him in trouble for playing with the mud at lunchtime when they weren't supposed to, and he's grade 8, right?
That's awesome. There's a wonderful report from the National Wildlife Federation that's called the Dirt Report. and it talks about all the health benefits of dirt, even just getting dirt on your skin and how it stimulates like serotonin and makes you so much healthier. And in the end, kids who are exposed to more dirt as kids will have such a lower rate of cardiovascular issues when they're adults. So amazing stats have come just from studying the effect of dirt on kids.
Does weather have a big impact on your learning day to day?
Not really, unless it's kind of something like if we have to work with our computers, like it's something we need to get done for projects. Sometimes it's hard because you can't use the computers out in the open. You'll have to be crammed into a small area. But other than that, if we're learning outside and kind of doing a lot of hands-on stuff, like without paper and pencil and stuff, it's easy. Just throw on a rain jacket and you're good.
It's taught them a lot about how their behavior and thought process and consequences. I think it's taught them a lot about consequences. So if anything else, it's self-correction in a lot of ways, right? Like we can tell them, but until they experience that, hey, I got really wet when I swam through that puddle, and it wasn't fun for the rest of the day.
You know, I guess it's kind of like construction. You know, when the weather's good, they do a lot of work, you know, or the guys excavating, building their basement or whatever. When the weather's good, production is high. When the weather's bad, still production, but it's for sure it's slower. But, you know, how many hours a day do kids need to be learning? You know, when I look at the efficiency of our school system, I think the actual learning part, you know, if you were super efficient and the kids just utilized every minute, probably the time from morning till recess, that block of learning, that's probably all the learning they do in a day. There's so many distractions with other things that are part of the school system. So there's another kind of learning. But when you look at purely academics, it can be condensed into a pretty tight area.
What can you not do in the rain? Like, it's way better to talk about weather, for example. Would you really want to talk about the water cycle when you don't even have any water around you? It just makes no sense. You can't obviously get out your big novel or your piece of paper and write in the open rain because it's going to be ruined. That's what we have the yard for. We'll go inside, right? Go outside, have the rest of the day in the rain, go in the shelter every so often. No big deal.
They've pushed their comfort levels, and that's neat to see. In terms of the learning, there is a lot of movement around that too. Like they're out in this rainforest and they're learning local plants and they're learning to identify flora and fauna, and it's pouring rain and they don't really even notice it. So in that regard, they're able to pick stuff up where kids from a mainstream school or who aren't used to being outside, they may be less able to learn when they're being poured rain on. So our kids, I think, have that capacity.
It fascinates me when people say you can't do that because it's raining. If you're out in it all the time, you can't remember it that wet or raining. Right? But when you're inside, you think it's raining so hard. But as soon as you go out there and you spend some time out there, you know, it doesn't matter.
I realize you guys are all kids, so of course, sometimes a Sunday afternoon can seem like a bajillion years, but we live a short period of time. We're not around for a long time, and our senses aren't attuned to seeing larger cycles. So when we think about this whole place that we're in right now, even though it's comprised of lots of individual living organisms, the whole thing all together is like one giant organism that's growing. It's very hard to see.
In ecological understanding, there's sort of different levels of that. In one respect, ecological understanding could just be recycling and you know, turning your taps off when you're using it. But I think the understanding that we're trying to shoot for at this school is more what David Orr calls implicatedness in life, that human life is part of a broader ecosystem and that the system is all interconnected. And in that regard, the school is engaged in a project of cultural change towards a more, what might be thought of an ecologically aware society or culture.
I think that as a child, you just have this capacity for wonder, and that's really what's instilled in you as a kid, and being outside inspires that. So that's something that you naturally bring into adulthood, and I think that's just a spark that happens in childhood, and it's so easy to happen because children are so much more open to these experiences.
I need that steak to go nice and close so that when we put the cone over top, then the cedar tree's inside of it, and the cedar tree's protected.
Is ecological understanding something that we have to instill through school, or is it something that the conventional school often inculcates out of us? A lot of theory would suggest that maybe kids when they're young have a deeper relationship with the world. They see the world as animate like themselves, and that it's only through a process of 12 years of schooling that they learn that the world is inert and can be manipulated solely for human benefit. So I think the advantage of starting young is trying to approach schooling in a way that allows them to maintain their natural curiosity.
Citizens realize that clogged freeways full of individual vehicles that each have their own internal combustion chamber that's burning petroleum products, releasing all kinds of nasty chemicals into the environment, that's creating all kinds of unknown trauma to our only source of life, the planet. It's a huge gamble, and I think that if we believe that schools should be places where children learn to be good citizens and good community members, both to their own human communities, but also to their ecological communities, then it's vital. It's absolutely vital. It's actually not even a question of that we should be focusing more on environmental issues.
One of the theories about environmental ecological education is that by being outside, by being in the natural world, by getting to know it, not just being taught about it, but by getting to know by being with it and in it, then you develop an emotional connection, attachment.
If they don't have the connection to nature, they're not going to care about it. They're not going to care that things might be destroyed or paved over. And we want them to be able to do something about it if they care about it.
Once kids learn to love nature, I think they are better equipped to face those big issues like climate change and those looming threats that can be so intimidating. I think if they start from a place of hope and wonder and love, I think that will help in the long run.
A lot of our lessons revolve around learning about the trees and the plants and the animals that we live with. And it's really important for the kids to understand that they're not the only ones here, that everything is a home to something, right? Whether it be a plant or another animal. And so to learn the respect of a dead log, to not just thrash it, that animals do use it and plants will grow in it. It's a big deal to a lot of the kids because they have a really strong connection to the natural world.
I'm way close to nature. Before at my old house, I'd just be going like we ripped behind this old hedge, like we just cut around in the back, but we didn't realize that we were killing the tree. But now that we're here, we're realizing that how to conserve all of the different plants and stuff instead of just going and ripping something apart.
Can you guys see the ferns growing on that one dead branch up there? Like there's a whole different ecosystem up there, isn't there? Like it's like the forest floor growing. How high do you think that is?
1,200.
I think it might be about 35 or 40.
No, it's.
Which should turn into how many meters?
Inevitably, situations occur where sort of a conscious teaching moment can arise. So for example, here in the forest, then there's a bit of a bog area that students were loving to play in, but the play can also and was also damaging to that bog. So then it raises questions about then our behaviour. So it's fantastic to play in there and we're kind of exploring it. But when you look, you see all the plants being trampled and so on, they're being explored to death. And so what do we do, right? You know, and some really interesting conversations with all the students, you know, around effectively what is our relationship with this world and how best to live in it. And whatever we do, there's some impact on the environment, you know. Just because you're not in the forest and you're in a regular sort of school building all day, then everything that we do still has an impact on the natural world. It's the driving to school, it's the, you know, the heating bills, it's, you know, the fuel that's burned. Being separated from it doesn't affect the fact that you're impacting it. And being in it, it's just more immediately apparent that you have an impact on it. And then hopefully that's a better learning experience to be able to mediate how we live with it. Yeah.
Okay, we have an apple, and we're hands holding the apple, and we eat some of it. We think it's organic, so we throw it into the bush. Is that an apple? What is it?
I realize that our world and our surroundings is the fishbowl that we will live in. And I want kids to grow up to be conscious of how their decisions affect their surroundings and their fishbowl. And as they become conscious of it, we all have to be consumers at some point. But how much and where and what is an important consideration. And so I hope that the kids grow up to become real critical thinkers as they go about their daily lives.
It's hard to understand what experience is and how we learn from experience. I think there's a basic sense that if we're out immersed and having a direct experience, that's going to be better than, say, learning from a book. But learning from a book is also an experience, and some kids will learn better from a book than they will learn from, say, being outside, for a whole host of reasons. So I would agree we do a lot of experiential education activities. We're doing a lot of hands-on games, we're doing a lot of hands-on learning. We're doing a lot of things where we're immersed in a space and learning from and through that space. True experiential education should be really thoughtful and it should be nuanced and reflective, where it's carefully crafting, it's designing a learning space where the kids have a sense of what's going on and where they're moving towards.
Whoever wants to share and try some of the stinging nettle tea, it's really, really tasty.
Oh, it's so good.
So I guess probably one of the best examples would be learning about salmon, because a lot of kids in classes learn about salmon because it's a big deal to BC. What is more valuable to you? Opening a textbook, reading about the salmon life cycle, looking at a picture of a salmon, coloring a picture of a salmon, and that's your day. Compared to picking up a salmon out of the river because it spawned and died, dissecting it, feeling the eggs, seeing the salmon in work, what are you going to remember more? The experience you actually had picking it up, looking at it, watching it, listening to it, or coloring that picture on the worksheet?
Okay, so here it is. And this triangular shaped object, what do you think it is? It's definitely the heart. Well, this one's kind of mushy. But anyway, there's this heart, and you see it's attached to the gills. So when the gills pull the oxygen out of the water, it immediately goes into the bloodstream, and the heart circulates it around the body.
Hands-on is often used, but I think that can be also misunderstood in a kind of trite way, you know. It's not just about hammering nails into wood, right? It's not hands-on and just in a sort of mindless doing way. I think it's a much deeper and bodily connection to the learning than that, you know. So if we're learning about a particular plant that the students have just come across that they've never seen before, then it's the ability to touch that plant and feel how fragile it is, to really see the tiny little hairs on it, or then to see the bee land on it, you know, and get the pollen on its legs and then fly off again. And so see the connections in that way, both at a cognitive and a sensory level. I think that's a lot of it. And most people really connect with that, because as soon as they've got over the like, oh, how could you possibly be outside all the time? They often say, wow, that sounds great. I would have loved to have learned like that.
So do you know what we use that plant for?
This one?
Uh-huh.
I don't know.
Well, I mean, it's a really important food plant.
It is?
Uh-huh. Those berries are really good food.
I thought they were flowers.
Well, those flowers will turn into berries.
Do they taste good?
They taste delicious. The only problem why people don't like them is they're kind of hairy.
I think it's way easier to listen to and to concentrate when you're actually out there doing it. Like in a class, after a while, like the teacher would be talking and teaching it to you. It's hard to listen after a while because it's not really that interesting. But when you're doing it yourself, you're out there doing it and you're interested in it.
I'm an archery instructor, and I teach other people how to be archery instructors. It's just one of my hobbies or things that I enjoy is doing archery.
Oh, come on.
I see archery and a lot of target sports as being really good for teaching focus. My son's an incredibly active child, and I spend a lot of time going, don't do that, that's not going to be good for you. But when I go to the archery range with him, or I go to the gun range, he can spend 2 hours without me telling him what to do once, and he will be completely safe and completely focused and on. And I think those skills that you learn there wind up transferring over to your learning abilities or your skills as you learn other things too. I also see it in following a process, because there's a real process to setting up and taking a proper shot and being accurate and being consistent. And those kind of skills, if they can learn to master that, they take the same thing and do that when they're writing.
Nate, is that the right one? I want to walk. Nice one, Nate.
We engage in a lot of technology. Saws, hammers, levels, squares, anything to build something out of. We work with knitting needles and protractors and compasses and laptops, right? So there's the whole list of technology that we can use.
Last year, a fun thing was when we built our outhouse. We went to Golden Pond, no bathroom facilities, so of course we built our outhouse. And for the younger kids, I took all the wood scraps, gave them hammers and a bucket of nails, and said, you know, fill your boots, have at her. And I recall one little girl saying, my dad never lets me do this. And away they went. And no bruised fingers. If they do whack their fingers, they didn't tell me about it. Maybe they were afraid that I would take it away. I don't know, but they just happily pounded nails. And when they got a little bit better at pounding nails, they started building boats or whatever they could build. So there was a lot of learning going on there. And again, that was the opportunity, tools in their hands.
Kids first have to respect the tool to be able to use it. If they can't respect it, they can't use it. If they can't show that they're going to be mature about it, they can't bring it. They can't take it out. You have 5-year-olds that understand the term blood bubble, which was taught to them last year, which means if they're working with a pocket knife, they can't have anyone within an arm's distance away from them. They all understand. We go over how to carve away from your body. Like, there's a lot of lessons that go around the use of tools, so it's just not, you can just bring it whenever you want and use it whenever you want. There's a lot of respect and teaching that goes into being able to use the tools that they use. What school there? No schools besides ours are okay with kids having a pocket knife. None.
Of course, they're cooking our hot lunch program. It's amazing when you see kindergarten kids with pretty sharp knives and chopping vegetables. It's awesome.
How's this one going? Perfect. Okay, you can just probably just dump the rest in there, Nate.
I'll mix it. Uh-oh.
Hot lunch started with the discussion around food security and about agriculture, and wanting to go a whole cycle of learning around what we could do to teach kids about food. And so our goal was to grow the food and then do the whole cycle of learning, which would intensify what food security would look like. It's not just reading it in a book or talking about it at home. It's actually the full experience of what food security could look like. If they were doing the gardening, they prepared the food, and then they ate it, and then do all the cleanup that goes along with that. So it's perfect.
We actually want to let it sit now for a bit, because the bottom of the pan is actually going to start to turn the brown, and then I'm going to start to incorporate that sugar again.
Big Feast restaurant in Maple Ridge is owned by parents of our school. So they volunteered to come in and give these kids an experience of cooking their lunch, from mixing ingredients, reading recipes, cutting, cooking, the whole 9 yards. And then we sit down and eat lunch together, which creates a really strong sense of community, that cooking together, eating together.
You, mister, are going right here with Mike. You are going over to Samaria.
One of our philosophies is that we don't actually do any marketing. We'd rather support the community in a way that represents our vision of the slow food movement and the local food movement, and supporting our community to be self-sustainable and grow in a way that meets the needs within our own community first. So that's part of the reason why we wanted to be able to pair up with a school within Mayforge and Pitt Meadows in order to be able to share some knowledge about the respective food.
Yeah. I got a grill shift I need to fill on Friday. You want to come work?
The feedback about Hot Lunch has been incredible because kids from kindergarten through grade 8 are now experienced using the tools of a kitchen, so at home they're participating more, they're able to make decisions around helping with the meal a lot better. So it becomes that 24/7 form of learning. We're learning all the time, and so we can take it from the schooling to home and back again. And it makes it for a much more social family time as well. It's not just the parents doing the cooking or serving.
We've learned that some things work really well, and we've pushed a lot of boundaries this year in terms of what we thought the kids could cook at the beginning of the year and what they've actually successfully completed. We had the Top Chef competition and put out 100 ingredients on a table and broke everybody into groups and said, you need to create a dish using only 7 ingredients. And everything was great. Everything actually tasted great. And they only were able to use 7 ingredients. They had to come up with a recipe, they had to work as a team, they had to use cooking skills and learn about flavor profiles. And each team actually made a fully edible dish. I just think that knowledge and respect and creativity around food is just so much farther than even I expected at the end of the year.
It beats pizza day, like by far.
Hot Lunch is probably one of the best examples of what I would call a circle of learning, where the whole learning activity comes together. And it starts with the growing or making or gathering, and then the preparation, the cooking, the eating, the cleanup, right? Those all form a piece of that circle of learning that sometimes is missing in a conventional classroom. So the Hot Lunch program is that perfect example of possibilities for learning.
Girls and boys, how many of you really had a good time getting to cook or do something today as you made the meal? Right? How many of you kind of discovered that you really liked some of the food that you cooked? Oh. I like those crepes and I like all the pastas.
Me too!
Right?
I like pastas.
So, girls and boys, we need to say a massive thank you to Stacy and Mike.
One more aspect about curriculum that people keep on asking is, where's the mathematics and where's the reading and the writing? And it's not like any other school in that all the subject areas are there, except the difference is that they're interwoven and mixed together so that the kids might not even know they're doing a subject. Because if we're assessing or evaluating everything about learning, about the regular school system or a conventional school system, then we have to look at the division of disciplines or the division of subjects. So kids will come out of an activity and not know they've been doing math. We have to tell them explicitly that this is a math activity if parents want to know, well, where was the math today?
I try to do it all sort of within the context of what we're doing. So when we're at the BMX track, the kids were looking at the distance you travel when you go around the inside of all the corners or when you go high in the corner and take the outside edge of it. There they're getting into unit conversion, they're getting into distance and measurement. When we're at Malcolm Knapp and they're doing forestry there and they're logging, I start getting them into the volume of logs and then the volume of cylinders. And so that's all concepts they do it in the regular, out of a textbook. But here the kids have the measuring tapes out, they're measuring the length, the width, using pi and all those things to find these answers. But it's all just hands-on and within context of what they're doing.
Probably when I think, what's the biggest struggle? I say math over and over. But it's there all around us. And again, it's one of those things that I think kind of gets absorbed, like the patterns. And so a lot of the building stuff is about patterns. So it's hard for us to measure. And another example where we used math was we decided to do a river velocity. We wanted to find out how fast the stream was flowing. So that's one of the times when we separated kids into sort of age groups. And I had the grade 3 to 5s. Randy took the older group.
Today, I'm going to talk as little as possible. And it's your job to get your 5 meters or your 10 meters out. It's your job to do your timing. And I will answer questions, but I'm not going to tell you how or what to do. Okay?
Wait.
Yes? Kids were talking about how fast is this water, and this is really fast, but they didn't have numbers. And so we set them up with, we kind of did a lot of thinking and learning about how would I figure out how fast this is traveling, what's conventional ways of measuring that, and then how could we do that here? Hey, a meter's not quite 3 feet, guys, but take a look. Take a look on these tape measures. They have centimeters, so you might be able to convert, right? And so once they kind of came up with their strategies for measuring those things, we went down to the river, they threw sticks in the river, timed them over a certain distance, and then wound up having to convert that into kilometers per hour. Okay, May, you ready? Okay. Just wait. No. If you guys could please total them up when we get back, divide by how many tests you did. If you did 5, I divide by 5 tests, right? That'll give you the average length of time it took your object to float 10 meters, right?
So a simple activity that just went huge. You know, it expanded forever, and really, when we go back, we'll probably do some more work on that. You know, so it opened up, you know, lots of science and lots of math. So the opportunities are there, you know, and it's our job to sort of search them out.
Like a math lesson we did at the beach was we talked about symmetry, and we had them, instead of just drawing a symmetrical picture, we had them build symmetrical castles. They all can tell you what symmetry means based on building castles. It was pretty awesome.
Nate, explain to me what you're doing.
We are making symmetrical, but in a pattern way.
Yeah? So what does that mean?
It means like we have a castle, and then we have a hole, and then we have a castle, and then, but it's on both sides the same thing.
What's that called?
Symmetrical.
In a classroom, you know, you're always buying manipulatives so that we can use them in this way to represent things. Whereas out here, I don't have a chalkboard often, and I don't have a whole bunch of counters or whatever we might want to use. So you wind up going to the kids, I want you to represent the area of a rectangle, and you got to show it to me sort of using what's around you. On Monday, we'll look at this on paper. Today, all I want you to do, I'm going to get out the tape measures and stuff for you. I want you to go and find a circle. I want you to measure the radius. The radius is what? Yeah, and you'll just go radius times pi, and you'll be able to tell me how many squares are there. Today, we're just going to do it with a measure. On Monday, we'll actually do it we'll look at it on paper so see what it looks like. So 2 or 3 people in each group. Set yourself up. Here's one tape measure somebody can take off me now. I'll go grab the rest. I think part of the reason I wound up doing that math lesson on area up against the side of the trailer was because it was wet that day and I couldn't get them to write it on paper. And so go to them, you know, represent area using the items around you, and they all could. But you just sometimes adapt with what you're demonstrating your understanding with, or, you know, some days you postpone the writing part of it but still do the learning part of it and write it the following day.
We like looked at trees and did the volume of them, and like when there was a falling down log or a stump, we did the area and circumference of it, and just looked at it and like measured the height of them from far away, and it's all within the natural stuff around you.
So you're gonna figure out how many times you'd have to flush your toilet to make 3 million cubic meters of water disappear. I find it fun, and I'm always impressed with the creativity that they use. Certain ones will come up with a way of representing it that I never thought of before, and I really like that. It shows real critical, creative thinking.
Jesse, use your hands.
BMXing is an avenue or an activity that allows for different possibilities, right? The riding down the dikes and the exploring on the roads or going to different locations opens the boundaries to what that classroom could look like.
So what we're gonna do is we're just gonna start where we left off.
No.
Okay? So you guys remember we did this.
My husband was the national coach of Canada for BMX for the last 4 years and was at the Olympics in London. So BMX is kind of like runs our life. So it's great to bring like something that's really important to our family to these kids, and it's great to see it becoming a big deal in their life.
Well, the only reason I'm really interested in BMXing is because it was really fun and I do like to ride bikes. And I have won a couple first place, second place trophies and third place.
I really like BMXing. I'm doing it now out of school too. And I like the bike rides we go on. I think it was really good to like watch the nationalists too and to have a good coach, because it really helps.
It was really amazing for those kids who couldn't even go on a family bike ride. I had one mom send me a message saying like it blows her mind her daughter couldn't go on that family bike ride, and now she's just given her and doing an amazing job. So the confidence that just BMXing and learning that new sport instilled in a lot of them was amazing.
Remember yesterday, or 2 days ago, we were looking at gears, you know, front gear to back gear, comparing them. Do you remember what term we used to call that? That was what? Tell the person beside you if you think it was. I was just having a look at the ratios between the gears, and they're funny because they talk about it being harder or easier to pedal, but they don't recognize what's going on in the gears to make it that way. And often they don't even recognize that when my pedals go around once, my back wheel's going around 3 times or 1 time. And so there's a whole bunch of things that they wind up discovering in that. And I went from having them count teeth on there to comparing those as a ratio and also as a percent. The back wheel went around about 3 times for every time the front ring went around once, right? And you guys discovered what? When it's on the small gear on the back, is that easier or harder to pedal? It was a fun lesson because the aha moments were so obvious to the kids, you know? And there was this grand confusion when things would work out certain ways. They didn't expect it to be that way, right? So it was neat to watch that. So the last thing I want you to do right now, with the bike that you were measuring, I want you to put it on a big ring, pop a helmet on, pedal a little bit and go, how hard was that? Then put it on the small ring on the back and see how hard that was to pedal. And then come back here.
It was a different way of learning how to do fractions. And in a normal school, you would like sit down at your desk and you'd sit there for like an hour, and the teacher would write up on the chalkboard 1/4 or like 3/4, and this is called a fraction. Da, 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 da. And you'd learn about it, and you'd just sit there and you'd be like, I want to go play my games or like do something. But when we were at the BMX track, it was really cool because we got to like spin the tires and like we got to ride the bike and pedal once around, and we got to see how many times the wheel went around. So like there's like 2 different ways of learning how to do it, and that's like what we've been doing throughout the year.
It's funny though, like you're never going to hit all the kids anywhere. So there's particular kids that don't like riding bikes, they fall and they don't like when they hurt themselves and things like that, and so they're kind of reluctant there, whereas they may get to the Stave Lake Powerhouse and just love the science of the electricity, and they enjoy it there, and others are going, I wish we were at the BMX track, you know. You're never going to win no matter where you are.
In the pocket guide, I'm trying to figure out the names of it.
Right.
In less than 20 seconds, I can figure it out.
Very good. Can I take a picture of you with this book so I can remember what you said? So you hold that book just like that. I'm going to take a picture of this. And this will help me remember later on when I want to write a story down about this, okay?
Sue was talking to me about learning stories, and she asked how it helps. I said it brings back all of what we learned. So if we don't think we're learning something, we write about an experience, and then we realize that we just learned all of this stuff. Like when we first started learning the anatomy of a fish and started cutting them open, at first I thought, this is awesome, I get to just cut open a fish, but then I realized that I'm learning a lot of science. Like these kindergartners are learning stuff that you would never learn until at least grade 9. So sometimes when we're learning, we're not always thinking that we're learning.
the beauty is that it's all mixed together, or weaved together to form a learning experience rather than this is math, or this is language arts or English, or this is social studies. Social studies, math, and language arts and sciences all flow together. It's not that it's not challenging, right? It's challenging to understand and get your mind to think differently about learning.
But I'll tell you where you cut. This is the vent, the opening. And that's where the eggs come out and everything else. So you're going to slide the knife in and you're going to cut all the way up right to the gill plate, okay?
It's so funny because they're not really realizing how much they know. They're not being confident in their knowledge. It's really weird. They know so much. A lot of it might be different from what a grade 7 might know in inside school. But they know so much. And it's crazy that they don't think that. It blows my mind.
There's less academics, a whole lot less. But an advantage to having a lot less academics is that you learn how to learn, so that when eventually you do go back to this regular school system, you will kind of, if somebody teaches you how to do something, you can do it easy, because you have good problem-solving skills.
What do you mean by like there's less academics? Maybe you kind of explain that.
Like, you do a whole lot less math and science, and there's a whole lot of PE, a lot of physical exercise, but yeah, like math, language arts, all the other things that you'd have in a conventional school system.
What you said about them not realizing they're learning, that happens a lot. And especially the first year with the grade 7s, because they'd spent their previous 7 years in conventional school, and you read about it in a textbook often, and then you do a lesson on it, and then you write a test on it. And they were coming to me going, I don't think we've learned anything. And I said to them, well, tell me about the river, tell me about the salmon, tell me about the watershed. And they just told me these reams of stuff. And then I said to them, so I'm gonna give you a test on this. What kind of grade will you get? And I'll go like 95%. And I was going, well, why not 100? Well, you know, we make dumb mistakes, but we know it all. And I said, well, do you really need a test, seeing as you know it all already, to prove to yourself that you've learned something? And they all kind of went, oh, I guess not. And they also, when I asked them, like, why do you think you didn't learn anything? They went, well, because we don't have a textbook. And so it was funny that learning in the way they were learning, they didn't think was valid. And I think it was completely valid. And they knew more that way than they ever do when I do lessons on it and then give them a test. You see that kind of dead log straight on the other side? That's straight across. Try to throw it straight out into the middle of the current that way, okay? And don't go up or down. Try to go straight out there. And yell as it hits the water.
Academics is a textbook, is what I think. And because we don't use textbooks, it's not academic. And one thing that I do with the little kids is when we play stealth, I teach them about food chains and predators and prey and that kind of thing, but they think it's just a game. So they don't think they're learning what a food chain is. They know predator-prey relationships. They know herbivores, carnivores, omnivores. And this is like grade 10 science. Grade 10 science right now in the curriculum is food chains, symbiotic relationships, which the best moment of my year this year was the day Nate dropped, well, isn't the rock a symbiotic relationship? And he's 6.
That's something that scientists do, is they look at the relationship between plants, and you're right. They have relationships like families. Yeah? You had a question?
We might have symbiotic relationship.
They might have a what? A symbiotic relationship. That's right, so they have a mutually beneficial relationship.
That's like my highlight, I swear. We insert knowledge into games and into adventures, and they don't realize that we're teaching them stuff. But they're learning stuff, and when a 6-year-old can use the term symbiotic relationship, I think they're actually learning some academics.
For a second.
Okay, let's have a look here. And it expands quite a bit, you guys, so you don't need much more than this. So that's what you guys want to do. You want to write down what the plant is used for.
And it's good for digestion.
Yep.
There's so many surprising things that come out of what we do. And one of them is community, that people really respond to the interactions and belonging to such a close-knit community, parents and kids and everyone.
I've been a teacher for 10 years, so in my experience, this community is radically different. There's a real intentional sense behind this community. People really want to be here. It's quite different than, say, your regular catchment school where it's just my local school and we just go and, you know, we either participate or we probably don't. And, you know, we might know the other parents from seeing them at pickups, but there's a real effort here around inclusiveness and in making other people feel welcome and feeling as though like this is your place, these are your people.
Parents are tremendously involved in the school, and often they are in regular classrooms as well. But as a grade 6, 7 teacher, by the time the kids come up to grade 6 or 7, parents sort of back away from the school. You know, they help out a lot in K1, 2, 3 kind of thing, and then, you know, the kids don't need them as much. They don't really want them around as much, and parents kind of feel maybe that they're not needed or wanted. Whereas in our school, every person here is a great asset and is helpful. You know, we could always use people. If I sort of sit back and think, what do I really like about my school? I say us, that's the community. It's huge.
You can be as involved as you want or as disconnected as you want, but I think everyone wants to feel a level of connection, and I think there's a lot of effort put into make sure everyone can be connected. I know the parent meetings, basically the Hearth Keepers gatherings are social and event as well as putting together what's happening in the school in the following weeks. People enjoy going to them. They enjoy that community and that event, and it's not a chore to go to a school meeting.
We have to have a strong community, and the only way this is going to change the system of learning or a way in which people learn is by having parents involved as much as they can.
Because right from the beginning, we made it very well known and wanted it to be understood that not only were parents welcome to be a part of this community, but it really was a hope and an expectation that they would be. This wouldn't thrive if people just dropped off and then left. And part of that was because in an effort to sort of upend this notion that there is a single teacher, that there is a single individual, usually human, that knows everything, that's the only one capable of teaching. We really wanted and encouraged parents to be a part of things because everybody has something to offer. Parents are our children's first and primary teacher, and so we wanted parents to feel as though not only were they welcome and to hang out, but also that wherever they felt they had some skills or expertise, they could either go out into the community and hook us up with different groups in the community, or that they were more than welcome to bring their skills into the school to share.
All of a sudden, okay, let's see what happens. That's a
So they could be here as much as they possibly can in the setting of the schooling that we're doing, or they are participating with the kids learning 24/7. So because learning happens all the time, the parents should be part of their kids' learning.
Nowadays, we've learned some things about if you can involve the community and bring the community into your education system is going to be stronger and better. So I'm hoping there's some modeling that comes out of this around that other schools can pick up.
Is there a type of kid that fits really well here? They all fit really well here. They do. And I see kids that can't sit still, they fit in well here. But then some kids that are more sort of quiet, methodical, they're great too, because I think they like maybe the serenity and that sort of aspect of the school too. So I think it's for everyone, and we want everybody. We want diversity.
I'm the first person to say that the traditional school system is set up for about 20 to 30% of students to thrive in. It's well suited for about 20 to 30% of kids. Arguably, I'd say the rest of them could probably find a place here.
I've had a couple students that came and went, I like being at a desk and being told what to do. And that's their personality, and it's just the way it's going to work for them. And yet, if they came and decided that they wanted to engage what was going on, they would learn here too.
One thing doesn't fit for everyone, and that's part of what I believe is is good around having lots of choice and lots of flexibility for people to find what does work for them and their child. So I think that some of the, some people love it, and it's working exactly the way they hope, and most of that comes because their kids are so happy. And if you can really get yourself to that place, that learning really takes place when kids are feeling successful and happy and good about themselves, you can let go of some of those, but what about the test? Are we sure they can read? Are we sure they're going to be able to do math if they're not stopping what they're doing and doing math? And so for some people who are just a little more hesitant to really trust that kids will learn when you integrate and make learning relevant, but they were basing their thoughts on what their schooling looked like for them. And so some people are a little less able to either stick with the program, or they get worried that their child is going to be behind. And so that's been an issue, a little bit of an issue. There are some things we have to fix or improve upon, and one of them is around how do you report to parents in a way that parents are always understanding that, the kids, if you had to put your child back at a regular school, they're not going to be behind, they're just going to be used to learning in a different way. So I think that's been the biggest issue is really getting a group of people who are going to trust that learning can take place in this way that looks so different for them.
You need to really be ready to have your own boundaries and ideas about what education and what learning is pushed a little bit. And you need to be able to trust that it's happening in seeing the joy that's coming from your child. It's not just about having a kid being outside being muddy all the time. Like, yeah, that's a huge piece. But when you're looking at the learning part of it, I would have a conversation with parents saying, you need to get that this is distinctly different and be okay with that.
For some children, depending on their circumstances, they've really found a home here, a safe place here, and not just the children, but their families too, have found a belongingness that they've never experienced before.
This place has created a space that has definitely saved some kids. And if that's the only thing we did, I would be happy that we existed for that reason. There's a few kids that I think, thank goodness for this school. There's a few kids, they can't sit still, and they're taking less meds, they're less anxious. It's doing so amazing that well. There's a family, there's a nest that's holding these sweet little souls that would die, that were being crushed or would have been crushed out there.
I think this school would be very beneficial for every child to attend for at least 1 year. Yeah, I think that the leadership and communication and respect and independence skills that are learned here every day would benefit every child for the rest of their life.
So look, girls and boys, we probably named 10 things that we appreciated, and I know there were so many more things that happened out there. What I want to tell you I appreciate is two things. One, that you guys are recognizing when somebody's doing something good and you're willing to say it out loud. I really appreciate that. The second thing I appreciate is that I had a fun time walking back with you. You guys were on, focused, you stayed together, you made it fun, and it was enjoyable. And I want to say thank you very much. Now, what's this thank you that Clayton uses?
OCM.
Okay, so OCM? OCM? Y'all see that? OCM?
We judge success by how much he wants to come back every day. We judge success by the depth of the relationships that he has here. We judge success by his willingness to come to learning and his level of excitement about it. There's no drudgery around learning here. There's no sense of inadequacy if you aren't. There's only continued invitation to join when it's the right time for you. For us, the success is in the emotion and in the excitement and the connection that he has here.
If she ever complained about having to go to school, I would say it wasn't working. And every morning I take her to school and she's never complained. She just loves to go. She comes back very happy at nights all the time. And so that way I figured it was working.
I know that with my own children, I'm hoping that they grow up to be independent, happy, successful adults in whatever they choose to do. And that's what I'm hoping happens through the grades here, is that as these children grow and learn and work here, they develop the tools to be successful, so a positive attitude towards learning, understanding of processes to go through to get the learning that you want. And that when they're finished, they feel confident and feel like they're able to be independent learners that don't need me pushing them along or telling them how to do it next.
Success means that kids are getting opportunities to be the best they can be. And success looks like engagement and happy and motivated. I'm hearing stories from parents where, the kids who didn't want to go to school are up and ready before the parents are trying to get to school. I mean, that's success. The success around the learning piece is that they can do the things and demonstrate that they can do the things that we know are going to be critical for them to be successful into the future. And I think that's one of the things that particular project is giving kids, are some of those, this is cliche, but the 21st century skills that you keep hearing about. They're able to make decisions, they're able to work in teams, they can critically think, etc. And they can do the math and read at the level that they need to be successful. So we will measure that by those kinds of criteria, including the fact that, if nobody wanted to go there, that'd be different than everybody's trying to go there. It's been a real catalyst that has shown us as a district, people want choice. And they went different. And it's incumbent upon us, I believe, if we're going to offer education into the future, that we provide as much of that as we can. Different, choice, flexibility. That's how I measure success.
20 years from now, when I happen to drive by Alpha Park, I'm going to think of you guys. And I'm going to remember special things about you because my time together with you has left a mark that's going to be there forever.
One of the issues that we have to deal with sooner rather than later is after grade 8, what happens, right? Can you learn like this and then have to learn like this? Because if that's harmful, then we have to sort of take it upon ourselves to say, okay, if we had a teacher who would grab this, then we could start funneling kids. Actually, it could be any school. Any one of our high schools could easily, right now, inside our legislation that we have right now, could grab this and take those kids out of the environmental school and do something much more aligned with what the kids are learning in the environmental school. And that's an issue we have to deal with.
It's going to be hard to transition over just from being outside all the time to kind of going back to a regular school schedule. So I'm inside a lot, but it's going to be different, way different.
There's going to be a lot of people in the hallways, and I'm gonna have to sit at my desk for like 15 minutes or something and focus the entire time, and then have a 5-minute break to run to my locker, wherever it is in that huge maze building, and then run to the other class or whatever. It's gonna be stressful, and it's gonna be hard for me, I think.
They all go to me, I'm gonna have a hard time sitting still. And they all have gone for visits to high school, and they come back and they go, it feels really closed or it feels stuffy. And so I can see that they're going to have to start to learn to deal with how it feels to them and get wrapped around that. I think academically they'll do fine. They're learners, they have a good attitude towards learning, and they kind of get what it takes in themselves to sit down and accomplish a project or something that they want to learn about. So I don't think that'll be a problem.
They'll just be bored. It's just what's going to happen. Because they're going to have so many different problem-solving skills and skills to adapt to different situations that, so what, they throw a textbook at them that they've never used. They're going to be able to adapt to that, no problem. I don't have any worries for these kids in high school. I've taught high school. But I'm also hoping that these kids, because they are so interested in and care about what they're doing, that they're going to bring their experiences into high school and like push themselves to include them somehow. And hopefully they can push their teachers too and get their teachers to grow as well.
I think we have to start to work backwards. We know what works. We're starting to see some innovation in pockets all around the district at all levels. And the universities aren't. as of yet. I'm hoping that at some point that the new kind of student, the new kind of kid is going to really push the need, because I think it's just a matter of time. You can't know what you know and keep doing what you're doing. So I think there's some move to look at graduation requirements in a different way. We had a big forum on that, and I think even parents now are starting to say, what you were asking of kids isn't going to help them be successful after they leave high school, so you better fix it. So there's push there. You know, the new kindergarten all-day program, play-based, is pushing from this end. Grad requirements are going to push from that end. I think you're going to see some changes. I don't see any way around it.
More and more I'm trying to tell parents that want their kids to come here not to expect anything the same. It's different. We've got to figure out how to use the tools differently, how to look at learning differently, how to be part of that whole new or different learning process.
This is just a brilliant idea. It's cutting edge. It's not for everyone, and nor is anything, right? So I'm hoping that we can find a way to sustain this as long as kids and parents are wanting it. I think it's incumbent upon us to provide something like this.
My hopes are that we can really see it through to the end, you know, as far as graduation from this school. I think the success of the school and the learning system, we won't know until 20 years from now, when these 5-year-olds are 25.
I just hope that for other kids that they get to do that aren't here, is that other schools can kind of get a better sense of maybe what we're doing and bring it to their classrooms more, so other kids can get some of the experiences that we're having as well. I think it's really important.
As you're out here, remember that you're responsible for yourself, and we want you to make good decisions for yourself that are positive and leave you in a good situation. So make sure that you're doing things that you think, this is a smart thing for me to do. I'm very good at kind of going with the flow and new things. Coming into this, it was a big question mark, and I was really nervous on many levels because I just didn't know what to expect, and there was no other school out there that I could go and look at and go, oh, that's how they did it. And as I've gone into this though, it's been an incredibly wonderful learning experience for myself. And I look around and I think, in 3 years, if it doesn't continue, what'll I do? Because I don't even know that, as much as I love teaching the regular classroom, I don't know that I could go back in there and teach the way I did. I know if I went back into a regular classroom, it would be so different. And that would be, I guess, another thing that I'd have to navigate.
I hope that every child gets to experience something like this, whether it's a month or a year or their whole education system. I think that every child would benefit from something like this. So my hope for the school would be that it would continue to grow and my children can graduate from this school. And I hope that we can continue to share our story with everybody.
Did the sun come out? That was him right there. Cold, wet weather were quite trying for him, especially by the end of the day.
Cougars may be more of a fear because they're predatory and they will sit up in a tree and watch, especially, you can edit this part out, but I told Todd, when you go to the bathroom and you take a buddy, take somebody smaller and slower.